What if I told you that somewhere, right now, in a quiet backyard coop, a living dinosaur is pecking calmly at the ground, completely unaware of just how ancient it actually is? Not a lizard. Not something merely dinosaur adjacent. A chicken. An ordinary, everyday chicken, standing quietly in the grass, carrying inside its body a connection to Tyrannosaurus rex considerably closer than almost anyone would ever guess just by looking at it. It sounds almost too strange to take seriously. A small, clucking bird pecking at seed, somehow related to one of the largest, most fearsome predators to ever walk the earth. And yet, scientists studying this question carefully, comparing bones, proteins, and genetic material, keep arriving at the very same conclusion, again and again. Chickens are not simply descended from dinosaurs in some vague, distant sense. In certain very real, measurable ways, they are still, quietly, walking among us today. Tonight, we are going to slowly explore exactly how strange and how true this connection actually is. We will look at the bones that first gave this secret away, the strange, resilient proteins pulled from inside a T-Rex fossil that changed everything scientists thought they understood, and the quiet, everyday chicken standing in a backyard somewhere tonight, carrying, without ever knowing it, one of the most remarkable evolutionary stories in the entire animal kingdom. We begin, gently, with a question that sounds almost too simple to matter. What actually happened to the dinosaurs? Because the honest answer, it turns out, is considerably stranger, and considerably more comforting, than most of us ever learn in school. For a very long time, the story most of us learn seemed simple enough. An asteroid struck the Earth roughly 66 million years ago, and the dinosaurs, all of them, vanished completely, wiped away entirely, leaving nothing behind but bones buried quietly in rock. It is a clean, tidy story, easy to picture, easy to remember. But it is also, in one very important way, simply not quite true. While it is accurate that the enormous, iconic dinosaurs, the long-necked giants, the fearsome predators, the towering plant eaters, did disappear entirely during this catastrophic event, one particular branch of the dinosaur family tree quietly survived. Birds. Birds are not simply descended from dinosaurs the way, say, humans are distantly related to early mammals. Birds are, according to the overwhelming weight of modern scientific evidence, themselves a surviving group of dinosaurs, specifically a lineage called theropods, the same broad group that included fearsome predators like Tyrannosaurus rex and the smaller, swift velociraptor. This means, quite literally, that dinosaurs never actually went fully extinct at all. They simply changed, shrank, sprouted proper flight feathers, and kept living, quietly, all around us, in forests, in cities, and yes, in ordinary backyard chicken coops, for the past 66 million years. It is a strange thing to sit with, that every time someone hears a rooster crow at dawn, they are, in a very real sense, hearing a sound produced by a small, modern descendant of the same broad group of animals that once included the largest, most fearsome predators ever to walk the earth. The evidence connecting birds to dinosaurs did not appear all at once. It built up slowly, patiently, across more than a century of careful paleontological work, one fossil discovery layered quietly on top of another. One of the earliest and most important pieces of this puzzle arrived in the form of a fossil called Archaeopteryx, discovered in Germany back in the mid-1800s. Archaeopteryx looked, at first glance, almost like something caught halfway between two entirely different animals. It had feathers, clearly recognizable as feathers, alongside teeth, a long, bony tail, and clawed fingers extending from its wings, features far more commonly associated with reptiles than with any bird alive today. For paleontologists studying this strange, in-between fossil, it offered some of the clearest early evidence that birds and dinosaurs were not separate, unrelated groups after all. In the decades since, considerably more fossils have emerged, particularly from certain fossil-rich regions of China, showing feathered dinosaurs in remarkable, exquisite detail, some clearly capable of at least some limited gliding or flight, others simply covered in soft, downy feathers used likely for warmth or display rather than flying at all. Piece by piece, this growing collection of fossils made the connection between birds and dinosaurs increasingly difficult for scientists to reasonably deny. Some of these Chinese fossil beds have preserved feathers in such fine detail that researchers have even been able to identify their original coloring, a level of preservation almost nobody expected to ever be possible for creatures this ancient. Skeletons offer some of the clearest, most direct evidence connecting modern birds to their dinosaur ancestors, and the similarities, once you know where to look, become genuinely striking. Both birds and theropod dinosaurs share a distinctive wishbone, called a furcula, formed from two fused collarbones, a structural feature considered a defining trait shared closely between these two groups. Both also share hollow, air-filled bones, a lightweight skeletal structure that, in dinosaurs like Tyrannosaurus rex, likely help support their enormous size without becoming impossibly heavy, and in modern birds, plays an equally important role in allowing flight. Even the way birds and certain theropod dinosaurs breathe shows remarkable similarity, both relying on a sophisticated system of air sacs extending well beyond the lungs themselves, a trait almost entirely unique among land animals otherwise. Perhaps most strikingly, several dinosaur fossils have been discovered preserved in a distinctive sleeping posture, tucked with the head folded back beneath one arm, nearly identical to how many modern birds, including chickens, commonly sleep today. It is a small, oddly touching detail, a habit apparently carried forward, essentially unchanged, across an almost unimaginable stretch of evolutionary time. Paleontologists studying these particular fossils have described the moment of realizing what they were looking at as genuinely moving, a small, familiar gesture connecting a creature that died tens of millions of years ago to something as ordinary as a chicken settling down for the night in a coop somewhere today. Let us pause here for a moment and simply rest in this quiet, strange thought together. Somewhere, Tens of millions of years ago, a small, feathered dinosaur tucks its head beneath its arm and settles down to sleep for the night, entirely unaware of the enormous span of time still waiting ahead of it, unaware of the asteroid, unaware of everything still yet to come. And somewhere tonight, in an ordinary backyard coop, a chicken settles down in almost that exact same posture, head tucked gently beneath a wing, drifting quietly off to sleep, carrying forward, without ever knowing it, a habit considerably older than nearly anything else alive on the planet today. There is something deeply calming in that image, a small, quiet moment of rest connecting two creatures separated by an almost incomprehensible stretch of time, and yet somehow, in this one small way, doing exactly the same thing. Picture it for a moment, a warm summer evening, feathers settling, the world outside slowly darkening, and somewhere in that ordinary stillness, an echo of something considerably older than any of us have ever really stopped to consider. We will continue shortly, moving toward one of the most remarkable, almost unbelievable discoveries in this entire story, a discovery involving soft tissue pulled from deep inside an actual Tyrannosaurus rex fossil. In the year 2005, a paleontologist named Mary Schweitzer made a discovery that genuinely stunned much of the scientific community. While studying a Tyrannosaurus rex fossil, she noticed something that, according to nearly everything scientists previously believed about fossilization, should not have been possible at all. Inside the broken leg bone of this 68-million-year-old dinosaur, soft, flexible tissue appeared to have survived, remarkably, largely intact. This finding faced enormous skepticism at first, understandably so, since fossilization typically replaces original organic material with minerals over such an enormous span of time, leaving only hard, stone-like remains behind. Soft tissue simply was not supposed to survive anywhere near this long. And yet, careful testing kept confirming the same remarkable result: delicate blood vessel structures and flexible protein fibers, genuinely present within this ancient fossil. Even more remarkably, researchers were eventually able to extract and analyze a specific protein called collagen from this preserved tissue, then compare its molecular structure against collagen collected from a range of modern animals. The results pointed toward one particular living animal sharing a closer molecular resemblance to this ancient Tyrannosaurus rex than nearly any other creature tested. That animal was the chicken. This single detail, quietly confirmed through careful, repeated laboratory testing, turned what had long been a reasonable but somewhat abstract scientific inference into something considerably more concrete, an actual, physical thread of evidence linking one of history's most fearsome predators directly to a bird most of us barely think twice about. This particular discovery deserves a moment of real appreciation, since it represents something considerably more concrete than simply comparing bone shapes or skeletal structures. This was actual biological material, protein sequences extracted directly from the tissue of a genuine dinosaur, compared molecule by molecule against tissue collected from living animals today. Scientists comparing this ancient collagen against samples from various modern species, including frogs, salamanders, and several types of reptiles, found that chicken collagen consistently showed the closest molecular match to the ancient Tyrannosaurus rex sample. This did not mean chickens are simply small, modern versions of T-Rex. Evolution over 66 million years has changed a great deal about both the chicken's size and its overall body plan, but it did offer genuinely compelling molecular evidence supporting exactly what the skeletal similarities had already suggested for decades. This discovery, published in a respected scientific journal and subjected to considerable scrutiny and repeated testing by other researchers, has since become one of the most frequently cited pieces of evidence connecting modern birds directly to their ancient dinosaur ancestors, moving this entire relationship from careful skeletal inference into something considerably closer to direct, measurable biological confirmation. Other laboratories, initially skeptical given how extraordinary the original claims sounded, eventually repeated the analysis on separate samples and arrived at strikingly similar results, gradually turning what once felt like a bold, almost unbelievable claim into a settled, widely accepted piece of modern paleontology. It is worth pausing here to properly appreciate just how strange this whole situation actually is, when you stop and really sit with it. An ordinary chicken, the same bird raised on farms, kept in backyard coops, and served at dinner tables across the entire world, carries within its own body a genuine, measurable molecular echo of Tyrannosaurus rex, one of the largest, most fearsome predators to have ever existed on this planet. There is no dramatic transformation required to picture this connection either, no need to imagine some wildly different, unrecognizable ancestor. The basic body plan is, in many important ways, remarkably consistent: 2 legs, clawed feet, a similar general skeletal structure, feathers rather than bare, scaly skin, even that same distinctive, head-tucked sleeping posture explored earlier in this story. What changed, overwhelmingly, across these 66 million years was size, diet, and the specific details of lifestyle, shrinking dramatically, shifting towards smaller prey and plant matter, gradually losing the massive jaws and teeth in favor of a simple, lightweight beak instead. The underlying blueprint, though, the fundamental theropod dinosaur body plan, remained remarkably intact underneath all of that change. It is a strange kind of comfort, in its own way, knowing that something this ancient, this fearsome in its original form, settled quietly, over millions of years, into something as gentle and unassuming as a chicken pecking calmly in the grass, entirely unaware of the extraordinary story written into its own body. Genetic research conducted in the years following Schweitzer's original discovery has continued adding further support to this same remarkable connection. Scientists studying bird genomes broadly, chickens included, have identified numerous genetic markers and developmental pathways closely mirroring those found in theropod dinosaur fossils, further reinforcing this relationship using an entirely separate line of scientific evidence beyond bones or ancient protein alone. Some researchers have even explored the genuinely fascinating question of whether certain ancestral, dinosaur-like traits might still be hiding, dormant, within a modern chicken's genetic code, occasionally triggering experimental studies designed to explore whether specific genes could be selectively activated to produce features closer to those seen in the chicken's ancient ancestors: teeth, a longer tail, and similar traits that modern birds have otherwise long since lost. While these particular experiments remain firmly within the realm of careful scientific research rather than anything resembling actual, functional dinosaur revival, they offer a genuinely remarkable glimpse into just how much ancient evolutionary history remains quietly encoded within a chicken's genome, patiently waiting, largely unused, after 66 million years of continued, gradual change. It is a quiet, almost poetic thought to sit with, that somewhere inside every ordinary chicken, tucked away and mostly silent, sits a genetic memory of teeth, of a longer tail, of an entirely different creature its ancestors once were, before millions of years of slow, patient change carried it gently toward the small, familiar bird we know today. Stepping back across everything explored so far, a genuinely remarkable picture starts to settle into place. An ordinary backyard chicken, pecking calmly at seed and scratching lazily at the dirt, carries within its body clear skeletal echoes of ancient theropod dinosaurs, molecular protein evidence linking it directly to Tyrannosaurus rex itself, and a genetic code still quietly holding traces of features its ancestors carried tens of millions of years ago. None of this happened through some dramatic, sudden transformation. It unfolded slowly, patiently, across an almost unimaginable stretch of evolutionary time, one gradual adjustment after another, shrinking, changing diet, losing teeth, growing feathers built for flight rather than simple warmth, until eventually, this same ancient lineage arrived at the small, familiar bird resting quietly in coops and backyards across the entire world today. There is still more of this remarkable story left to explore, further details connecting other modern birds to their own particular dinosaur ancestors, and a final, quieter reflection on what it truly means that dinosaurs, in a very real sense, never actually disappeared at all, simply settled quietly into forms so small and familiar that most of us walk past them every single day without a second thought. Chickens are far from the only modern bird carrying this same remarkable dinosaur connection, though they happen to be one of the most thoroughly studied, largely thanks to how widely they are farmed, researched, and genetically mapped across the world. Ostriches, emus, and other large, flightless birds carry their own particularly striking echoes of their theropod ancestry, their powerful legs and upright posture bearing an especially close resemblance to certain smaller, fast-moving dinosaur species. Some paleontologists have even pointed toward the ostrich specifically as one of the closest living approximations of what certain small to mid-sized theropod dinosaurs may have looked like in motion: long, powerful legs built for speed, a similarly balanced posture, and that same distinctive, forward-leaning gait visible in fossilized dinosaur trackways preserved in ancient mud now turned to solid stone. Birds of prey, hawks, eagles, and owls in particular, also carry unmistakable echoes of their ancestry in their sharp, curved talons and hooked beaks, features that would look entirely at home on a small, feathered predator stalking through undergrowth 66 million years ago. Even the way certain birds hunt today, patient stalking followed by a quick, precise strike, mirrors hunting behavior paleontologists have inferred from the skeletal structure of several smaller theropod species. Even something as ordinary as a pigeon bobbing its head while walking carries a small trace of this same ancient inheritance, a movement pattern researchers believe helped stabilize vision in ancestral theropods long before pigeons ever existed to inherit it. One particularly interesting piece of this broader puzzle involves bird eggs, which turn out to share a great deal in common with the eggs laid by many theropod dinosaurs, considerably more than most people realize. Fossilized dinosaur eggs, when carefully studied, reveal shell structures, internal membrane patterns, and even nesting arrangements strikingly similar to those found among modern birds today. Some fossilized nesting sites have even preserved theropod dinosaurs positioned directly on top of their eggs, wings partially spread, in a posture almost identical to how a modern hen sits on her own nest. This particular discovery offered yet another compelling piece of evidence suggesting that certain nurturing, protective nesting behaviors, often assumed to be uniquely bird-like, actually predate birds themselves by tens of millions of years, inherited quietly from their dinosaur ancestors rather than invented fresh somewhere along the evolutionary path. Researchers studying these fossilized nesting sites have described the experience of uncovering them as genuinely moving, a small, tender moment of parental care, frozen in stone for tens of millions of years, echoing something as simple and familiar as a chicken settling gently over her own eggs in a coop somewhere today. Let us pause here for a moment, drifting away from the deeper science and simply picturing a calmer, quieter scene instead. A warm, humid forest floor somewhere in the distant past, ferns swaying gently in a light breeze, and nearby, a small, feathered dinosaur settling carefully over a clutch of eggs, wings spread just slightly for warmth, entirely unaware of the asteroid still waiting, tens of millions of years away, to eventually reshape the entire world around it. There is something quietly moving about imagining this scene, an animal simply doing what countless mothers across countless species have always done, protecting and warming its young, entirely unaware of its own place within an enormous, unfolding evolutionary story still very much in progress. Somewhere far off, thunder rolls quietly across a distant ridge, and the small dinosaur simply settles a little lower over her eggs, unbothered, patient, doing exactly what instinct has already told her to do, the very same instinct a hen still carries today. We will continue shortly, exploring how scientists first began piecing together this remarkable connection, and just how much resistance and skepticism the idea originally faced before eventually becoming one of the most well-supported conclusions in modern paleontology. The idea that birds descended from dinosaurs was not always so widely accepted within the scientific community, and it took considerable time, evidence, and persistent argument before it eventually became the well-supported consensus it represents today. Early proponents of this idea, working with far less fossil evidence than researchers have access to now, faced genuine skepticism from colleagues who preferred alternative explanations for how birds first evolved. A researcher named John Ostrom played a particularly significant role in reviving and strengthening this connection during the 1970s, studying a small, agile theropod dinosaur called Deinonychus and noticing striking skeletal similarities to birds that earlier researchers had largely overlooked or dismissed. His careful, persistent work helped shift scientific opinion gradually, opening the door for the wave of feathered dinosaur fossil discoveries that would eventually follow from China decades later. By the time Mary Schweitzer's soft tissue discovery emerged in 2005, the broader scientific community had already largely accepted the bird-dinosaur connection based on skeletal and fossil evidence alone. Her molecular findings arrived less as a shocking reversal and more as a remarkable, welcome confirmation of a conclusion decades of careful, patient paleontological work had already been steadily building toward. It is worth appreciating just how much careful, patient scientific work sits quietly behind this now widely accepted conclusion: decades of fossil hunting, careful bone comparison, skeptical debate, and eventually, direct molecular testing, all slowly building toward the same remarkable answer. Science rarely arrives at conclusions this significant quickly or easily, and the chicken-dinosaur connection offers a genuinely good example of just how much patient, cumulative effort typically sits behind even the most widely known scientific facts. This slow, careful process also offers a useful reminder about how scientific understanding tends to actually work, rarely through one single, dramatic discovery, but rather through countless smaller pieces of evidence accumulating steadily over time, gradually strengthening a conclusion until it becomes essentially undeniable. The chicken sitting quietly in a backyard coop tonight represents the end point of exactly this kind of long, patient scientific journey, one bone, one fossil, one molecule at a time, slowly revealing a connection considerably stranger and more wonderful than almost anyone would have guessed by simply looking at the animal itself. It is a genuinely reassuring thought too, in its own quiet way, that even the strangest, most surprising scientific truths tend to eventually reveal themselves, given enough patience, enough curiosity, and enough careful, persistent looking. There is a particular kind of quiet wonder in realizing just how ordinary this whole remarkable connection has become in daily life, largely without anyone noticing at all. Chickens are raised by the billions worldwide, kept as backyard pets, studied in laboratories, and eaten at dinner tables across nearly every country on Earth, all while carrying, quietly and completely unnoticed, this extraordinary evolutionary connection reaching back to some of the most fearsome creatures the planet has ever produced. This particular kind of hidden wonder, extraordinary history embedded quietly within something completely ordinary and familiar, appears surprisingly often once you start looking for it throughout the natural world. The chicken simply happens to offer one of the clearest, most well-documented, and most delightfully unexpected examples available anywhere in modern science. It is worth sitting with that thought for a moment, that something as thoroughly unremarkable as a backyard chicken, clucking softly, scratching at the dirt, settling down for the night, carries within its body a genuinely astonishing story, one connecting it directly back to some of the largest, most powerful predators ever to walk this planet. Perhaps that is part of what makes this whole story so quietly comforting to sit with tonight, a reminder that the ordinary world around us is often carrying far more wonder inside it than we ever pause to notice, hidden in plain sight, in something as simple and familiar as a chicken settling calmly into sleep. Modern paleoartists, the specialists responsible for creating scientifically informed illustrations of what dinosaurs likely actually looked like, have shifted their work considerably over recent decades precisely because of this deepening understanding. Older illustrations from decades past commonly depicted dinosaurs as scaly, reptilian creatures, closer in appearance to oversized lizards than anything resembling a bird. Modern reconstructions, informed heavily by the fossil evidence and molecular research explored throughout this documentary, increasingly depict many theropod dinosaurs covered in feathers, displaying colors and postures considerably closer to birds than to reptiles. Tyrannosaurus rex itself, once almost universally illustrated as entirely scaly, is now considered by many paleontologists likely to have carried at least some feather covering, particularly earlier in its development or across smaller, related species within the same broader family. This shift in scientific illustration reflects something genuinely important about how far our understanding has come, moving away from dinosaurs as simply giant, extinct reptiles, and toward a considerably more accurate picture, ancient relatives of the birds still living quietly among us today. Let us settle once more into a calmer, quieter moment before gathering the final threads of this remarkable story together. Picture a quiet farm at dusk, chickens slowly making their way toward the coop as daylight fades, feathers settling, soft clucking gradually quieting into stillness as each bird finds its spot for the night. There is nothing outwardly remarkable about this scene, an entirely ordinary end to an entirely ordinary day. And yet, within each of these small, settling birds sits a connection reaching back across 66 million years, through soft tissue, through collagen, through bone structure and behavior alike, all the way back to some of the most powerful predators this planet has ever known. The coop grows quiet, one bird after another tucking its head gently beneath a wing, settling into that same ancient sleeping posture explored earlier in this story, a small, familiar gesture stretching back across nearly the entire history of complex life on land. We will continue shortly, gathering together everything explored throughout this documentary, and reflecting quietly on what it truly means that dinosaurs, in a very real sense, are still here, walking quietly among us, exactly as they always have. Bringing together everything covered throughout this documentary so far, a genuinely remarkable picture settles into place. Skeletal evidence stretching back over a century, feathered dinosaur fossils preserved in exquisite detail, soft tissue, and molecular protein evidence pulled directly from an actual Tyrannosaurus rex, and genetic research continuing to reveal just how much ancient history remains quietly encoded within a modern chicken's own genome. None of this emerged overnight. It built slowly, patiently, across generations of careful scientific work, skepticism gradually giving way to overwhelming evidence, one discovery layered carefully on top of another until the connection became essentially undeniable. Chickens, ostriches, hawks, and nearly every other bird alive today all carry this same remarkable inheritance, quietly, unassumingly, largely unnoticed by the millions of people who encounter these birds every single day. There remains a little more of this remarkable story left to explore, a final, broader reflection on what it truly means that dinosaurs never actually disappeared at all, simply continuing on quietly, in considerably smaller, gentler form, all around us. Stepping back now across this entire remarkable journey, from ancient fossil beds in China to a soft tissue sample pulled carefully from inside a Tyrannosaurus rex bone, a clear and consistent thread runs through everything explored so far. Dinosaurs did not simply vanish completely all those millions of years ago. One remarkable branch of their family tree quietly survived, shrinking, adapting, growing feathers built for flight, and eventually settling into the small, familiar birds we now encounter every single day without a second thought. The chicken, perhaps more than any other living animal, has become the clearest, most thoroughly documented living link connecting our modern world directly back to the age of dinosaurs, carrying within its bones, its proteins, and its genetic code, a story considerably older and stranger than its ordinary, everyday appearance would ever suggest. There is still a little more of this remarkable story left to explore, a final, quiet moment spent simply appreciating just how much ancient history continues living quietly alongside us, largely unnoticed, in backyards, farms, and coops scattered all across the world. There is a particular irony worth sitting with here, one that becomes clearer the longer you spend with this story. For decades, popular imagination pictured dinosaurs as something almost mythical, distant, terrifying creatures locked safely away in the deep past, encountered only through museum skeletons and movie screens. And yet, this entire time, a living, breathing descendant has been walking calmly through backyards, farms, and city parks nearly everywhere on Earth, entirely unnoticed. Children who dream of dinosaurs, imagining towering, roaring creatures from some distant, ancient world, are, without ever realizing it, often standing just a few steps away from something carrying that very same ancient lineage, quietly pecking at seed in a nearby coop. The distance between imagination and reality, in this particular case, turns out to be considerably smaller than almost anyone ever expects. This quiet irony offers a gentle reminder about how easily we can overlook the genuinely remarkable simply because it has become familiar. The chicken has been sitting right in front of us the entire time, its ancient story hidden in plain sight, waiting patiently for science to finally catch up and notice what its bones have been quietly saying all along. There is something almost comforting in that thought too, that wonder rarely needs to be manufactured or imported from somewhere distant. Sometimes it has simply been waiting quietly nearby the whole time, overlooked only because familiarity has a habit of dulling our attention toward things we see every single day. This is, in many ways, one of the quiet gifts good science keeps offering us, again and again, the chance to look at something we already thought we understood completely, and suddenly discover an entirely new, considerably richer layer sitting just underneath the surface, waiting patiently the whole time. Farmers and poultry keepers, long before any of this scientific evidence emerged, likely never imagined they were tending to living relatives of Tyrannosaurus rex each morning while collecting eggs or scattering feed. There is something quietly delightful in picturing generations of ordinary people going about their daily routines, completely unaware of the extraordinary evolutionary story quietly unfolding right there in their own barnyards. Even today, most people raising chickens simply see them as chickens, useful, familiar, occasionally a little stubborn, without ever pausing to consider the deeper story written into every wishbone, every hollow bone, every distinctive, head-tucked sleeping posture. Knowing this history does not change how a chicken behaves or what it needs day to day, but it does add a certain quiet wonder to something that might otherwise feel entirely ordinary. Perhaps this is one of the more comforting lessons tucked inside this whole remarkable story, that wonder does not always require something rare or distant. Sometimes it is standing quietly in a coop in your own backyard, waiting patiently to be noticed by anyone willing to slow down long enough to actually look. Next time someone happens to watch a chicken tilt its head sharply to one side, tracking a sound or a flicker of movement nearby, it might be worth remembering, just for a moment, that this same small gesture likely echoes something a feathered dinosaur once did too, tens of millions of years before any farm or coop ever existed. Let us pause here for a moment, resting quietly in this thought a little longer. A soft evening settling over a small farm somewhere, chickens gathered loosely near the coop entrance, murmuring softly to one another as the light fades. Nothing about this scene demands attention or seems particularly remarkable at first glance. And yet, within this quiet, ordinary moment sits one of the most well-documented evolutionary stories available anywhere in modern science, tens of millions of years distilled down into something as simple as a chicken settling in for the night. There is a particular kind of peace in recognizing that the extraordinary and the ordinary are, quite often, simply the very same thing, viewed from a slightly different angle. Somewhere overhead, the first stars begin appearing faintly against the darkening sky, the same quiet transition that has closed countless evenings like this one, long before farms, long before coops, long before humans were even part of this particular story at all. The chickens settle a little deeper into the straw, feathers puffing gently against the cooling air, entirely unaware that this same quiet ritual, gathering, settling, drifting towards sleep, has been repeating itself in one form or another for an almost incomprehensible stretch of evolutionary time. We will continue shortly, exploring one final, gentle reflection on what all of this ultimately means, and why this particular scientific story has resonated so strongly with people first encountering it, long after the initial surprise of learning it has worn off. Part of why this particular scientific story has captured so much public imagination likely comes down to how it playfully upends something most of us learned confidently as children, that dinosaurs are simply gone, vanished entirely, existing only in museums and imagination. Learning that this is not quite true, that a genuine, living connection persists quietly all around us, offers a small, satisfying jolt of surprise that few other scientific facts manage to deliver quite so effectively. There is also something genuinely charming about the specific animal involved. If this connection had been discovered in some rare, exotic bird most people will never personally encounter, it likely would not carry the same emotional impact. Instead, it involves the chicken, arguably one of the most common, familiar animals in the entire world, transforming something thoroughly ordinary into something quietly extraordinary. This particular combination, genuine scientific rigor paired with an almost playful sense of surprise, helps explain why the chicken-dinosaur connection continues resurfacing in documentaries, casual conversation, and curious late-night searches years after Schweitzer's original discovery first made headlines. It also tends to change, at least a little, how people look at chickens afterward, a small shift in perspective that lingers quietly long after the initial surprise has faded, turning an entirely ordinary backyard animal into something considerably more interesting to simply sit and watch for a while. It is worth considering, too, how this discovery quietly reshapes our broader understanding of what extinction actually means. The popular image of extinction often suggests something total and complete, an entire lineage simply erased from existence. The story explored throughout this documentary complicates that picture considerably, at least when it comes to dinosaurs specifically. Rather than complete disappearance, what actually happened involved massive loss alongside quiet, continued survival, an entire branch of the family tree persisting, transformed almost beyond recognition, while its more famous relatives vanished entirely. This nuance matters, offering a considerably richer, more complicated picture of how evolutionary history actually unfolds, rarely through clean, total endings, and more often through gradual transformation, loss, and quiet persistence occurring simultaneously. Understanding extinction this way adds a certain depth to how we think about the natural world more broadly, a reminder that even history's most dramatic turning points rarely tell one single, simple story, and that survival, when it happens, often looks nothing at all like what came before it. This same pattern, massive loss paired with quiet, transformed survival, appears again and again throughout the broader history of life on Earth, dinosaurs simply offering one of the clearest, most well-documented, and most emotionally resonant examples of it. Modern genetic technology continues advancing this particular field of study considerably further than what was possible even during Schweitzer's original 2005 discovery. Researchers today can sequence genetic material with far greater precision and speed, allowing increasingly detailed comparisons between modern birds and the fossil record stretching back tens of millions of years. Some ongoing research projects continue exploring exactly which ancestral traits remain dormant within modern bird genomes, and under what specific conditions, if any, certain ancient characteristics might theoretically be encouraged to resurface during development. This research remains firmly experimental and carefully regulated, conducted purely to deepen scientific understanding rather than pursuing anything resembling actual dinosaur revival. Even so, this ongoing work continues adding fascinating detail to the broader picture explored throughout this documentary, steadily deepening our understanding of just how much ancient history remains quietly written into the genetic code of birds living all around us today, patiently waiting, largely dormant, inside a genome shaped gradually across an almost unimaginable stretch of evolutionary time. Some researchers studying this field describe it less as searching for a way to bring dinosaurs back, and more as slowly learning to read a story that has been quietly written into bird genetics all along, waiting patiently for the right tools and the right questions to finally uncover it properly. Let us settle once more into a calmer, quieter moment before gathering the final threads of this remarkable story together. Picture a quiet morning somewhere on a small farm, mist still clinging faintly to the grass, chickens beginning to stir and stretch as the very first light breaks over the horizon. One by one, they step out into the cool morning air, entirely unaware of the extraordinary history quietly written into their own bones. There is something deeply peaceful about this scene, an entire remarkable evolutionary story simply continuing on, quietly, without fanfare, exactly as it has for millions of years, entirely indifferent to whether anyone happens to understand or appreciate the deeper story unfolding within it. Somewhere nearby, a rooster stretches its neck and calls out into the morning air, a sound that has, in one form or another, echoed across this same planet for an almost incomprehensible stretch of time, carried forward quietly through millions of years of gradual, patient change. There is nothing about this ordinary morning that announces its own significance. The mist simply lifts a little further, the chickens simply continue their quiet, familiar routine, and somewhere within all of it, an ancient story keeps unfolding exactly as it always has. We will continue shortly, gathering together this entire journey one final time, resting quietly in everything explored throughout this documentary before finally bringing it all to a close. Considering everything explored throughout this documentary, from ancient feathered fossils in China to a soft tissue sample carefully extracted from an actual Tyrannosaurus rex bone, a genuinely remarkable picture has slowly come into focus. The chicken, an animal most of us encounter constantly without a second thought, carries within its body one of the clearest, most thoroughly documented connections to the age of dinosaurs available anywhere in the natural world. This story reminds us, gently, that remarkable truths often hide within the most ordinary, familiar corners of our everyday lives, waiting patiently for careful attention and curiosity to finally uncover them. Dinosaurs did not simply disappear into history books and museum displays. They transformed, quietly, patiently, into something smaller, gentler, and considerably more familiar than anyone might have guessed. None of this required imagination or exaggeration to feel remarkable. The bones, the proteins, the genetics, all of it simply confirms, patiently and repeatedly, something that was quietly true the entire time, long before anyone thought to look closely enough to notice it, sitting calmly in coops and backyards scattered across the entire world. Perhaps that is the quiet, lasting gift of this whole story, a reminder that the world around us is often considerably stranger, older, and more wonderful than it first appears, if only we take the time to look a little closer at the things we have grown too familiar with to properly notice anymore. Picture, one final time, that same quiet farm at dusk, chickens settling calmly into their coop as darkness gently falls. Feathers ruffle softly, heads tucked gently beneath wings, and one by one, each bird drifts toward sleep, carrying, without ever knowing it, an inheritance considerably older than nearly anything else alive on this planet today. There is something deeply calming in that image, an entire extraordinary evolutionary story settling quietly into rest each night, exactly as it has for millions of years, entirely unaware of its own remarkable significance, simply existing, quietly and peacefully, exactly as it always has. The coop grows still, the last soft sounds fading into silence, and somewhere within that stillness, an ancient story continues quietly resting, exactly as it has every single night for longer than anyone could ever properly imagine, waiting patiently for morning to arrive once more. Outside, the night settles fully over the farm, stars scattered quietly overhead, the whole scene wrapped in that same unhurried calm this entire story has carried from its very first quiet image all the way through to now, an ancient rhythm continuing on, gently, undisturbed. And so, gently, we arrive near the end of this quiet journey through one of nature's most delightfully surprising true stories. We began with a simple, strange question, whether a living dinosaur might be closer than anyone imagines, and slowly traced that question through ancient fossils, through soft tissue pulled from deep inside a Tyrannosaurus rex, through genetics, through history, and through countless quiet, ordinary chickens settling calmly into sleep in coops and farms scattered across the entire world. The answer, it turns out, was there all along, hidden quietly in plain sight, waiting patiently for careful science, and a little bit of curiosity, to finally notice it. 66 million years of history, quietly folded into something as small and familiar as a backyard chicken, still walking among us, still settling into that same ancient sleeping posture every single night, carrying forward a story considerably older than anyone ever expected to find hiding somewhere this close and this ordinary. Somewhere tonight, in a quiet coop not so different from the ones imagined throughout this whole story, that same ancient lineage continues resting peacefully, entirely unaware of its own remarkable history, simply existing, quietly and gently, exactly as it always has, and exactly as it likely always will. And so, gently, we arrive at the true end of this quiet journey through one of nature's most delightfully surprising true stories. We began with a simple, strange question, whether a living dinosaur might be closer than anyone imagines, and slowly traced that question through ancient fossils, through soft tissue pulled from deep inside a Tyrannosaurus rex, through genetics, through history, and through countless quiet, ordinary chickens settling calmly into sleep in coops and farms scattered across the entire world. We traveled from feathered fossils preserved in exquisite detail across ancient Chinese fossil beds, to a single, remarkable moment in 2005 when a researcher named Mary Schweitzer noticed something impossible sitting quietly inside a broken dinosaur bone. We followed the slow, patient scientific journey from early skepticism to overwhelming, molecular confirmation, and paused, more than once, simply to picture a chicken settling into that same ancient, head-tucked sleeping posture its ancestors once used tens of millions of years earlier. The answer to our opening question turned out to be considerably closer, and considerably stranger, than almost anyone expects. 66 million years of history, quietly folded into something as small and familiar as a backyard chicken, still walking among us, still carrying forward a story most of us never think to look for in something so wonderfully ordinary. Somewhere tonight, in a quiet coop not so different from the ones imagined throughout this story, that same ancient lineage rests peacefully, entirely unaware of its own remarkable history, simply existing, gently and quietly, exactly as it always has, and exactly as it likely always will. Thank you for spending this calm, curious evening with us, uncovering one of nature's gentlest surprises together. If this story helped you see something ordinary in a whole new light, and maybe even helped you drift off along the way, consider liking the video, subscribing for more slow, thoughtful stories like this one, and sharing your own thoughts down in the comments below. Sleep well, and good night.